Trial continued today for a man charged with a murder in a 2024 shooting in Love County. KXI 12's Marisa Sisk reports from the county courthouse.
Day 2 of George Scoggin's second-degree murder trial began with witness testimony about the fatal night in February of 2024. 59-year-old George Scoggin is accused of fatally shooting Jimmy Sparks at a house Scoggins owned in Love County. Scoggin says he believed Sparks was stealing from him. When he called 911, he told dispatchers he'd shot a thief. But Tuesday, witnesses said Scoggin and Sparks were actually friends. A third friend, Bill Seaman, had lived on Scoggin's property for about 10 years. Witnesses say Seaman had gotten into a dispute with Scoggins and later left, leaving behind some tools. One witness said Seaman was uncomfortable with going back, so he'd asked Sparks to pick those tools up for him, where Sparks was later shot and killed. Scoggin said he didn't have his glasses on when Sparks arrived, and what he thought was a weapon in Sparks' hand turned out to be a bottle of motor oil, according to court documents. Last August, Scoggin's attorney filed a motion for stand-your-ground immunity, since the shooting had happened on Scoggin's property. That motion was initially granted by the judge, but the prosecution successfully appealed. Tuesday, Love County Undersheriff Trent Daniel testified, saying Scoggin's demeanor was initially calm. Unusual behavior for someone who just shot another person. Testimonies are expected to continue throughout the week. If convicted, Scoggin faces 10 years to life in prison. We'll continue to follow the trial. In Love County, Marisa Sisk, KXII 12.